Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. Season 7 premiere of Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And your co-host, Anton Paras here.
We have a return guest who's been on the podcast numerous times at this point, too numerous for me to even count, but this is his first season premiere. Garret Ohringer, pleasure to have you as always.
It is a pleasure to be here. I feel like Thanos collecting the stones with the amount of times I've been on the show. But I think I've been on the show more times than he has stones. So
far more.
Kind of stinks, yeah. Oh, well.
Are you in double digits at this point?
I don't know. I'm getting up to kind of the count that Marvel has movies under their cinematic universe. So that's the goal over here. We got to get plus 20.
Well, Garrett, have you built your IMDb page?
Fun fact, I actually do have an IMDb page because I was in one of my friend's movies that he shot while we were in high school. So if you actually do Google me, that's for you two listeners, you will find my IMDb page.
Well, listeners, you know it. We know that there's a bit of a Garrett fan club among our listeners. I might be a president of it. So make sure that you're looking up that IMDb and adding it to your wall of Garrett poster.
Yeah, your wall of Garrett poster.
Well, I think at this point, you've been on enough Marvel-related episodes that it is safe to call you the official Marvel consigliere of the podcast.
Oh my God, I feel like a made man.
You should.
Yeah,
I should.
You're our Marvel man.
I really am going to put this on my resume, and I know this is going to land me that next big opportunity in life.
Almost like our Captain Marvel.
You're at 9. I have a guest counter in another tab.
9. Oh my God,
yeah,
this is very exciting.
Oh,
yeah.
Just like that obscure animated film 9.
Oh yes, or that other movie 9 from that
Daniel
year.
Day-Lewis.
Exactly the movie I was thinking of.
Which is equally obscure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're at 9.
Nice. Oh, yes. And I get to talk about a film that maybe I love, maybe I don't. I don't want to spoil it for the listeners.
Marvel movies are always fun to cover because there are so many of them at this point. Kind of like the James Bond series. The quality is all over the place.
Yeah, but just like the James Bond series, very strong cultural staying power, and they make a buttload of money.
Some of them do. Some of them are completely forgotten.
But
like
I mean,
Incredible Hulk.
Like the Incredible Hulk.
Like the Incredible Hulk. That's what I was going to say too.
Thor: The Dark World doesn't have much staying power, does it?
I think as a franchise or as a IP, we can say Marvel has staying power.
Oh,
Marvel
for sure.
has staying power, but when we look at the individual, it might be less than the sum of its parts. I feel like this is actually a very good lead-in to this movie too, honestly.
It is, because these films are just old enough where you can start to really see which ones of them are going to be classics or not. Like this film that we're covering today is 10 years old, almost.
Yeah, almost 10 years old.
That is wild to think about.
Yeah, because I remember seeing this, doesn't seem like 10 years ago.
And again, I'm sure we'll get into it, but this feels just as modern, if not more tactile and real than some of the films Marvel and a lot of other blockbusters they're putting out today.
Sadly, yes.
Sadly, yes.
Well, let's get into it then. The film that we're covering for our season premiere is Avengers: Age of Ultron. When Tony Stark jump-starts a dormant peacekeeping program, things go terribly awry, forcing him and the rest of the Avengers to reassemble. As the fate of Earth hangs in the balance, the team is put to the ultimate test as they battle Ultron, a technological terror hell-bent on human extinction. Along the way, they encounter two mysterious and powerful newcomers, Pietro and Wanda Maximoff. Avengers Age of Ultron was released on May 1st, 2015 by Marvel Studios and Walt Disney Motion Pictures. Written and directed by Joss Whedon, starring Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Don Cheadle, James Spader, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Bettany, Kobe Smulders, Anthony Mackie, Linda Cardellini, Stellan Skarsgård, and Samuel L. Jackson. The budget was $365 million. Wow. That is $484 million adjusted for inflation. And the box office was $1.4 billion. That is $1.85 billion adjusted for inflation. This is the 11th film in the MCU, and it is part of what is known as Phase 2. Anton, this is easily the biggest movie we have ever covered for a season premiere. The hype for this was insane in 2015. But Garrett, everyone knows you're a Marvel fan at this point if they're a regular listener of this podcast. But why did you instantly agree to be on this episode and talk about Age of Ultron?
Besides Iron Man 3, which listeners might recall I am very favorable on, I think Age of Ultron is probably the most misunderstood and underappreciated film out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Excuse me, I'm just so excited to talk about it. I can't even finish my first sentence too. I remember watching it the first time and it felt like everything was moving too fast. So much was happening on screen and I couldn't kind of take it all in and appreciate it. And I found myself, I remember, thinking too much during the movie, trying to catch every little thing. And that really took me out of the movie. And I really could feel it ripping at the seams and just the, for lack of better words, bloatedness of the movie too. But again, having those rewatches, having, I guess, the ability to rewatch a movie too, allows you to kind of pause and reflect and figure out the things that worked or didn't work. And there's so many great character moments in this movie that I really don't feel like we get as much of in subsequent Marvel movies. Personally, I haven't felt anything like this in terms of character-driven time given to the screen time since Endgame. And again, that was a 3-hour and 2-minute long movie. And also, this is really the only movie that we see where the Avengers are actively a team. And even then, they are still broken up by the end of it. But for all subsequent movies, they're either fractured teams or teams coming together at the last second, a la Endgame too. So we'll get into a lot more of those thoughts, but that is a very quick, excited, and hurried reasoning for me and my love of this movie. Oops, spoiler.
I love the enthusiasm. Anton, I want to go back to the hype of this because this reached a level of hype that very few movies achieve. The first Avengers comes out in 2012. It does gangbusters at the box office. I'm not going to say it was a risk for Marvel because they had been on a pretty good streak with their standalone Phase 1 films. But the proof of concept was the first Avengers movie. If that one hadn't done well, it would have set the franchise back, and it exceeded pretty much all expectations. Everyone loved it when it came out, including myself. I still loved the first Avengers, but the pressure was on for this one.
Yeah, not much else really.
Just so expertly said. There's no answer to that besides.
Well, the reason why I wanted to highlight the hype is as crazy as the hype was for this, it still wasn't even the biggest film of the year. That was The Force Awakens, which came out in December, back when we were all naive and thought Star Wars would be okay.
It is wild to think that also Furious 7 made more money than this movie too.
I was surprised by that, but when I looked into it a little bit, it makes sense because of what happened to what's his name.
It's been a long. What's their song? It's been a long.
It's been a long time
without you, my friends.
Wait, did I ever tell you guys like when I found out like we were pregnant?
I didn't know.
Yeah,
we were
pregnant. my wife and I.
You told me when you told me. I don't know.
Yeah, it was the day before. It was July 3rd. We were doing a Fast and the Furious. My wife and I were doing a Fast and the Furious marathon, and it was the last Paul Walker film in the series. When she was like, so I took these many tests and I'm pregnant. And I was like, I'm never going to forget this moment.
Were you crying because Paul Walker took the other turn in the other road, or because you found out you were going to be a family of three?
It was because, we're going to be a family. And then I look out the window and then Paul Walker just looks at me from his car and then just drove off.
In his awkward CGI-ish face.
Yeah. And that song played.
So good.
Damn.
To bring it back home. Yeah. Big year for movies.
Big year.
Big.
I'm a casual Marvel fan, as you both know. So I knew of Ultron, but really not much else. I didn't really know what to expect other than I was told he's one of the biggest villains in the Marvel lore. So I was excited, especially when I heard James Spader was going to be voicing Ultron. I always liked him as an actor. At that point, I really liked that show that he was on, The Blacklist. Pretty good show, especially in its first season. I saw this in theaters and I basically fell asleep.
What put you to sleep? What specifically? Especially on a rewatch. Could you
Was it when
identify that point?
was it when they were in that naval ship?
I don't even remember that part. So sure, that part.
Yeah.
It was around the farmhouse. I'm like, this is.
I feel like we're going to debate the farmhouse because that is personally one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Oh, I like it now.
Right. See, that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
On retrospect,
Yeah.
everything that you felt like didn't work initially, it's what clicks now.
Yeah, I had started rewatching it since, but this really was the first time I like analyzed it, quote unquote. So
I think I
Different
alluded to
lens.
it before, but again, on rewatch, I think I appreciate this movie more and more. And one quote I really liked that I read was, "This movie has so many tiny moments of consequence framed by a larger plot of inconsequence relative to the larger MCU. So many big seeds are planted, so many things are foreshadowed, but a movie as a whole, I mean, Pat, I don't want to steal your joke, but how long does the Age of Ultron really last for?"
less than a week. I think they should have changed it to the Ultron weekend.
Weekend at Ultron's.
Weekend at Ultron's.
Weekend at Ultron, just carrying around dead Ultron sentries all day.
The puppet metaphors there.
Right.
We got something going. Feige, call me. I got an idea. 200 million. I got you.
He's like, called me 10 years ago when this would have made sense.
Call me 10 years ago when I actually listened to peons and peasants.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Garrett. It is misunderstood because this is certainly the most polarizing of the four Avengers films.
Mm-hmm. But
The first one seems to be pretty well loved, and the last two, same.
Yeah.
But this one, it gets strong reactions.
the one thing I will really say about this too is there's no resolution to anything in the problems that are presented in this movie. Namely, when Wanda gives all of the Avengers their little visions, they don't grow as characters. They don't solve the problems that they're presented with. They're just left to kind of sit in those problems. And we as an audience are left to sit with these problems until subsequent movies too. Subsequent movies, which either A, hadn't been fully mapped out yet, a la Ragnarok, Thor's vision does not match the movie that we got, etc., etc. I don't think we really need to go too deep yet, since I know we're still at the top. But again,
Yeah,
we
it
can
just
get
shows
into it.
ripping
Yeah.
at the seams a little bit is where this movie really started to show that.
Yeah, we still have a bit more to go, but I'll just say this, Garrett. I think the more I look at this film and think, what does it set up for the future and what gets shoehorned in for Marvel to tease out a lot of their, fun movies for the future, versus there's a movie in here that's much more complete and well written, and it's hard to separate those two thoughts out, because even just really quickly, that example of all of the visions that are going to analyze and say, what does this say about future MCU films? Or can we just look at it as devices in storytelling for this particular film that represent the fears of the individual Avengers? And if you look at it like that, then it fits the film perfectly. If you look at it as does this more so represent the future of the MCU, then there's a lot of analysis and open-ended questions. But we have
And
a
I
lot
think
to talk about.
Yes, and that's why I think, to your first point too, it's, did they answer those questions in relation to the characters? Not really. It's more in service of the movie, and I'm sure we will get into kind of the battling creative ideas and the powers that be behind the scenes too. So won't spoil all the fun just yet.
I have a question about Scarlet Witch
Yes.
that maybe both of you can answer. So is she basically like Mewtwo? Like, what can't she do?
So that's the fun part. She does not have a defined power set in
Okay.
Marvel anymore.
She does whatever the plot requires.
Using her power set to like basically have some of the most culture shifting storylines in the comic books. I don't know if there was necessarily thought put out of like, hey, like let's make sure to kind of power up this character and like power them outside of the scale compared to every single hero, in the same way that the power scaling Marvel's done with the Scarlet Witch is honestly kind of baffling.
She almost one-shots Thanos in Endgame.
Right.
Yes, I actually feel like this is a great digression because speedsters and magic people are the two biggest problems in any movies because a
Mhm.
speedster is honestly the most impervious to anything character, a la the Quicksilver that we see in X-Men movies. He's nigh
Right,
invulnerable.
Way
right.
better version of Quicksilver than this.
Versus like what is you can put a few limitations on magic, like do you have to cast spells to do magic kind of thing?
Right,
Nah,
like
you
Harry
just do
Potter
some
rules.
finger tutting. Just finger tutting. That's all we
Like
like.
do you need to exactly, do you need to do finger stuff to cast your magic?
Anton, you do
Anything
a lot of finger stuff
to cast magic. I know it's
to
called
cast
Thursday.
magic. To cast magic.
Right.
It's
Natural,
called
yes.
it's called
Listeners, we're all finger tutting, but
yeah.
none of you can see it, so you'll just have to imagine the chaos
Yeah.
magic that we are
Should we
putting
do
out in
the
the world.
production history?
We
Sure.
should. No more
Okay.
finger tutting. This is going to be fun. This is going to be 10 hours long. I can't wait.
I'm enjoying this. So, production history of Avengers Age of Ultron. Marvel began planning Phase 2 back in 2011, which would start with Iron Man 3 and conclude with this one, the second Avengers film, or at least that was the plan. Despite Joss Whedon originally claiming that he wanted the second one to be smaller and more personal, this film was going to be bigger in scope. And Whedon also claimed that he was undecided on returning, but Bob Iger insisted that he would be. Most of the first film's cast members were under contract to potentially appear in the sequel. However, Downey was not, as his 4-picture deal with Marvel expired after Iron Man 3. They quickly extended his contract. At the premiere of that film in May of 2013, at the premiere of Iron Man 3 in May of 2013, Whedon revealed that he had completed a first draft of the screenplay, started the storyboard process, and met with the actors. And it is worth pointing out that this was the first Marvel film that Whedon was involved in writing from day one. He was brought in on the first Avengers film to rewrite what Zach Penn had already written. At the 2013 San Diego Comic-Con, Whedon announced that the film would be subtitled Age of Ultron. He added that Ultron's origin would differ from his comic roots and that Hank Pym would not be involved with Ultron's creation. It quickly became clear that Age of Ultron was going to be one of the most expensive films ever made. The budget ended up costing over $150 million more than its predecessor. This was primarily due to the enormous raises that the cast received. It is currently listed as the 6th most expensive film ever made, a decade on. Because of this, Whedon was under pressure from day one of pre-production. The Marvel Studio executives made it clear to him that the film would need to outperform the first one at the box office in order to maintain their expected profitability. Casting continued into August of 2013 with the announcement that James Spader would play Ultron. In November, Marvel confirmed that Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson would play Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, respectively. Second unit filming began in February 2014 in South Africa, with principal photography taking place between March and August, primarily at Shepperton Studios in England. Additional footage was shot in South Korea and Italy, a real globetrot. To create the scenes depicting how Quicksilver views the world, scenes were shot with an ultra-high-speed camera and later combined with shots of Taylor Johnson moving through the same scene at normal speed.
Because Ultron was 8 feet tall, the 5-foot 10-inch James Spader had to wear an antenna-like contraption made out of a thick piece of wire, with 2 red balls attached to the top that went up his entire back and 3 feet above his head. This was done so the cast members that shared scenes with him could have a reference point for where his eyes would be. The 2 red balls represented the placement of Ultron's eyes. Elizabeth Olsen stated that this was actually distracting because Spader would be giving an intense performance, and out of instinct, she would look at him rather than the balls representing his eyes. Sorry. So Elizabeth Olsen had trouble looking
Are
at
you
James
laughing at
Spader's.
balls?
Yeah. Just Elizabeth Olsen had trouble staring at James Spader's balls. That's all. So that's what I took away from that. So Whedon wanted to include even more characters that were ultimately seen in the finished film. Once he learned that Marvel was in negotiation talks with Sony, he asked about including a Spider-Man cameo at the film's end. After being told that wasn't possible, he asked for Captain Marvel and was given permission. Feige let him shoot some Captain Marvel footage, which he did using an uncredited extra taking the place of Carol Danvers, so that when Marvel cast an actress in the role, she could be edited into the film. That didn't actually end up happening. The reveal of Scarlet Witch in her Avengers costume that you see at the end was actually a Captain Marvel plate shots. Upon showing the rough cut to the Marvel executives, they described it as, quote, a ponderous mess, end quote. They particularly disliked the scenes at Hawkeye's farmhouse. Whedon fought to keep these scenes in. The film contains 3,000 visual effects shots completed by 10 different studios. Brian Tyler and Danny Elfman replaced Alan Silvestri as the film's composer. Despite grossing $1.4 billion, Marvel saw it as a disappointment. It made less than the first one in the States, but more overseas. Many of the executives thought it should have made another $500 million, and it sits at a 76% Rotten Tomatoes score. So, the Age of Ultron.
We will take a brief break as we hear from a sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. Time to talk why wasn't it better. Number one reason, I want to talk about Joss Whedon.
Do you guys like Joss Whedon?
I don't know. My
I like
voice
his
went
work.
up 3 octaves, which means I need to convince myself a little more. Teenager me was a big fan. Who are we kidding?
He's done a lot of good work.
Yeah.
His screenplay work that he's done over the years. You forget he worked on stuff like the original Toy Story.
He's someone that is very imaginative and is the perfect writer for comics and just sci-fi or any really kind of fantastical property. He just gets it, and I feel like there's a strong passion for it.
Also at that end too, he's very Shakespearean with how he writes too. Very much
Mhm.
deconstructing of his characters too, basically stripping them down to the bone too. So even if the story is something crazy like the Avengers, the X-Men, a Captain America story too, understanding why the characters tick and their interactions with each other and kind of finding that pathos in them, he's a master at that. And really that was his calling card and what he showed he was able to do well in Avengers too. So I can understand, Pat, to your point, why he really wanted to quote unquote scale the movie down and make it feel a little smaller.
Yeah, regardless of how you feel about him, whether it's personally or the rest of his work,
Yes.
he is one of the biggest reasons why the MCU was so successful during its first 2 phases.
He was almost given the keys to the kingdom effectively in phase 2. He was overseeing production, right, with Feige for all of those movies post-Avengers, pre-Ultron.
Yeah, you can definitely say Feige's someone that has had a long history with Marvel, and so being a fan on the first point probably saw within Whedon a colleague or someone that actually really cares about comics that could do a good job here. But there was a split.
There would be several splits, I guess, if you wanted to get into like the whole totality of Marvel's history so far. Garrett, was Whedon the primary reason why Ultron was the main villain of this film?
I don't think so. The thing is, I can see why Whedon loves somebody like Ultron for the villain of his movie. It's basically just an evil, darker version of Tony Stark in how we're presented him during the movie. So he does serve as a great foil, not only to the Avengers, but to Tony, basically the main character of the MCU, kind of mining those depths of the character. Even though Ultron is a very forgotten villain, wherever he might appear next in Marvel, whether it's Vision Quest or another What If series, as far as this movie goes, he serves as a great foil to the Avengers and a great person to not only build the character of Tony Stark, but also understand the character better too. So again, I can see why Whedon wanted to go with him because he even makes that pointed call out to Scarlet Witch. He says, we can destroy them, we can hurt them, but you can destroy them from the inside too. That's what Whedon's all about. As much as there are, giant robot battles and spaceships flying in the sky, we all know for a fact that that's not his forte and not what he was interested in. He's interested in destroying these characters from the inside.
Yeah.
So not a direct answer to your question, but my thoughts there on maybe why something like Ultron attracted him so much.
I know prior to this film's release, a lot of fans were questioning why Ultron would be the main villain, why it wasn't Thanos, because, we had seen glimpses of Thanos up until this point. I guess, was Guardians of the Galaxy the film in which we got the best look at Thanos thus far in the MCU?
Yeah,
the look
definitely
that we would see in 2018, yes.
Yeah. Whedon explained that by saying, quote, we have to stay grounded. It's part of what makes the Marvel Universe click, their relationship to the real world. Thanos is not out of the mix, but Thanos was never meant to be the next villain. He's always been the overlord of villainy and darkness, end quote.
A quote like
Yeah.
that, though, to me doesn't ring as maybe as true as maybe it would for something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where Ronan and Nebula were working for Thanos. So, of course, Thanos is that big bad, but they're dealing with, for lack of better words, the villain of the week, like a Power Rangers episode. But saying that for Ultron when he is totally disconnected for Thanos, I don't know, just rings a bit disingenuous for me hearing this now. But Anton, what do you think?
I think that when you look at the architecture of the MCU and the different phases, I'm not convinced of Thanos not being the next villain. It just doesn't make sense.
He was teased in the first Avengers. Like, it was like very clear where they were going with this.
My only argument here is if the purpose of it is to make more films, that way you're making more money, you don't want to completely, don't want to reveal it all in the second film if this is going to be your big bad. That's more of an executive decision. And also then you have every Infinity Stone that still needs to be revealed is in your subsequent movies.
Right. That's fair.
It was too soon for Thanos, but also at the same time, this movie is basically, your Empire Strikes Back, where you have to also set up that big finale as well. And you also have to set up the other individual stories even before that finale, while also continuing the stories of all of those movies that came out previously too, post Avengers. So there's a lot of work that Joss Whedon had to put into this movie.
As evil as Thanos is, by the way, I don't see him as the overlord of villainy and darkness. Like, he's not like an Emperor Palpatine, like I'm completely pulling the strings type, because how connected is he to any other villain in Marvel? Like, not at all, actually.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, besides being a part of one of the most famous comic book storylines of getting all the heroes together, you are kind of right about that.
But then even, just he has nothing to do with most villains that I can say in terms of like either directing them to like make any decisions. But yeah,
I think the better
apart from the first Avengers movie, you're right.
Yeah.
I think a better way to kind of like think about it is like Thanos brings so many people against him. Like even in that original Infinity Saga comic book run by Jim Starlin, he has the Celestials against him, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers, the X-Men, you name them, they hate him. Basically.
That's true.
So it makes sense of why setting up Thanos for the MCU makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you kind of blow your load with the post-credits, excuse my language, if you blow your load with the post-credit sequence, why did I say it again after apologizing? The first movie, just to do it again is such an unnecessary tease. If anything, I think the post-credit stinger of Age of Ultron is possibly the worst inclusion this film could have made. Because if Thanos is saying, fine, I'll do it myself, then get off your butt and do it yourself. I hate that line so much.
For me, watching this for the first time, it threw me off because I was like, well, what does this whole movie have to do with Thanos?
It doesn't answer the so what.
Right. Well, you're right about Whedon having to do a lot of work on this film, and it didn't go so well for him because it left him drained. Feige asked him if he wanted to direct the next two Avengers films, and he declined. Now, he said, quote, I think they knew that even if I could give them something, it wasn't going to be anytime soon, end quote. He was forced to do things on this movie that he didn't want to do. The infamous cave sequence, he did not want to do it. And the Marvel executives, they wanted to set things up for what would become Thor Ragnarok. They forced Whedon to do it. He shot a much longer scene with Thor and Selvig, but the final version is shorter because test audiences didn't respond well to it in the original cut. And Whedon really did hate it. I have some quotes here that I'm going to read. Garrett, I got this, of course, as you know, from MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, written by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and Gavin Edwards. Anton, you need to read this book. You'd really, really like it. Back to this cave sequence. Whedon said, quote, they pointed a gun at the farm's head and said, give us the cave or we'll take out the farm. I respect these guys. They're artists, but that's when it got really, really unpleasant. And around the time, end quote, and around the time of the film's release, he expressed his frustration with the studio, describing the entire thing as, quote, I have been to the other side of the mountain. I gotta say, it's been dark. It's been weird. It's been horrible. Continued, here's failure. Here's compromise. And then continued, with so much at stake, there's going to be friction. It's the Marvel way to question everything. Sometimes that's amazing, and sometimes that's amazing, end quote. So this would be the last Marvel film he was ever involved with. Whether or not he ever wanted to eventually return to the series is unclear, I think it's safe to assume he never will. He broke the cardinal rule of airing his grievances in public, which is a no-go for Marvel.
Which is a no-go for a lot of studios, really.
Yeah.
No studio wants to get bad mouth in public.
No.
It really is interesting, though, because you can feel his fingerprints in Phase 2, Joss Whedon's. And then similarly, I know this is a digression from Joss Whedon, but James Gunn similarly was kind of given the keys to the Marvel Kingdom, or at least to ride shotgun with Kevin Feige. And then post his firing, rehiring, and also just Feige, even his further ascension to power too, wasn't as, for lack of better words, willing to share that power with James Gunn. So it is really interesting to see a lot of these kind of creatives, both, in small names and in big names, like with Whedon and Gunn, come into power with Marvel, and then seeing kind of how that relationship's both evolve and devolve, and the impact it has on the movies as well. So we're still kind of feeling the effects, I think, of James Gunn now leaving for DC too. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how that impact really differs from Joss Whedon leaving, which personally, I don't think after Ultron, anyone really missed him.
Yeah, one really good points there. I think one added layer I think is just interesting to think about is this is Disney Marvel at this point, right?
Yes.
This is post acquisition. This is fully like we're well within our Disney hooks being in Marvel, and I feel like there's a Disney way of doing business that is starting to kind of creep up on the business.
Well, and that's really when they started going to directors who, for lack of better words, weren't yes men. I don't want to say that sounds a little mean, but were more willing to play in Marvel sandbox and the rules that were given to them as directors. Obviously, there have been a few exceptions that we've seen, but the Russos, even admittedly, as much as I love their work outside of Marvel movies, they said, you just tell us what you want and we will make the best thing possible within these constraints. Again, constraints is a much harsher word than I want to use, but in these constraints that we are given.
I don't think it's a knock on the Russos. To their credit, they very astutely knew how to work within that system.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I'm also not necessarily knocking that system. It's been very successful for Disney and Marvel. I'm just saying that it may not work for everyone, and it clearly doesn't work for Joss Whedon.
To your point, Garrett, they didn't miss him.
They gave him a good "don't let the door hit you" where the Lord split you on the way out the door.
Yeah. I'm assuming he is like generationally wealthy from his work with Marvel, because my question for you both, this was the beginning of his downfall, right? Because his career has never been the same since. Now, part of that is due to the harassment allegations against him, which started in 2020, but this was 5 years before 2020.
You can honestly look at the Justice League reshoots that he helmed instead of Zack Snyder and the allegations against him on set. Anton, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were going to say that, but that really felt like, the first real big staggering blow to his downfall.
No, I was going to say, no, exactly where I was going to go there. Also, nerds have had it out for Whedon ever since Buffy. So he's known, he's always had arrows pointed at him.
Pat, were you a big Buffy guy, or were you more of an Angel man? Who would you say you were?
None of the above.
But you loved King Piccolo and Dragon Ball Evolution.
I don't see how you couldn't.
I mean, James Marsters, our boy Spike.
Yeah. Denied an Oscar nomination.
Honestly, I really think that was the best movie of the 2010s, and it's just wholly misunderstood. Just
Look,
like
I mean,
Avengers
I
Age of
understand a lot of people were blown away by Christoph Waltz and Inglourious Bastards, but James Marsters' work in that film.
That's a true villain.
Yeah.
But yes, to your point about Joss Whedon's downfall, really,
This was it.
Once he started calling out Marvel, that was the left, the reshoots of Justice League, the right, the allegations, the uppercut to the knockout.
Never get involved in a land war with Disney.
That is, honestly.
That's my advice.
That is very apt advice.
I don't know why I'm including this point here under Joss Whedon, but I'm just trying to talk about like maybe Whedon's contributions and like the direction, because I do think he deserves a lot of credit here. Like, one thing I was really struck by rewatching it this past weekend is this movie's aged really well. Not only with how fresh it felt to me, but especially like the CGI. I was really impressed by it. The Marvel stuff, I think it's hit or miss with how it ages. It's nice to see that the $365 million budget wasn't wasted. Well, you brought it up, Garrett. The Justice League had an enormous budget. That was a couple years after this, right?
It's 2017.
Okay, yeah. So about the same time, but that movie probably had about or maybe even a bigger budget and does not look nearly as good as this.
No, I do think this is the movie though where Daddy Ike Perlmutter started clutching his pearls a little bit more about the cost of Marvel and Disney, and a lot of that crew definitely felt that squeeze as well. But you are very right; they made the most of the budget, and this movie still looks really good. Still, 10 years on, I will say what I do not miss is that gray and piss filter washed out coloring that they did in so many superhero movies in the 2000s and 2010s. But there are some scenes that really just stand out, look amazing. The opening assault on the Hydra base in Sokovia looks fresh out of a comic book too. That slow-mo shot of all six of them is a perfect splash page. And again, to Whedon's credit, he says he doesn't know how to make the actions or film these scenes, but he knows how to give that direction to the folks in-house to get those images lifted off from the page too. Again, I have things to say about fighting hordes of robot sentries, Ultron sentries, but again, that slow-mo shot of all of the Avengers working in unison and just all of their powers full on display,
Oh, the
it's hard to
360 shot?
it's hard to hate that. You
It's
can't hate
amazing.
that. It's
Yeah.
still one
It's
of my
incredible.
favorite shots
It's so
in
fun.
Marvel.
Yeah.
I find myself always rewinding that scene mid-scene and trying just to focus on one thing, but my eyes are always darting all over the screen trying to take it all in.
They clearly had enough time to work on the CGI for this. Unbelievable. What was it? 3,000 effect shots in this film.
Yeah.
My Lord.
I don't think any of them look bad because I was watching this on Disney Plus, probably like both of you guys did, and it was in 4K. And I was like, wow, this is 10 years old. This looks incredible.
A lot of people knock on the South Korea chase scene too, but I'm sorry, that scene of Hawkeye counting 4-3, give him hell with Black Widow,
Ugh.
just launching out of the Quinjet with the motorcycle, right into my veins. That is pure heroin for me.
It's good. It's long.
Yes, the sequences are long.
They're
The
long.
end fight is long. You know that was a Marvel mandate, not a Joss Whedon mandate too. But again,
yeah.
at least if you're going to make it long, make it look good. That's what she said, maybe. I don't know. We got a lot of balls and like innuendo in this episode already.
One thing I noticed, Garrett, you were giving something a thumbs down earlier. Alan Silvestri, he was missed. Brian Tyler and Danny Elfman, they did the score. I was unimpressed.
I know, and I'm sure we'll get into this too. Danny Elfman was brought on a little bit later to kind of punch up the score as well and bring back a lot of those main themes and motifs too. And to be honest, that's all I really remember in the score here are those little Avengers theme motifs. One actual instance where the score actually does work really well. One of the best scenes in the movie when Hawkeye is giving Scarlet Witch the pep talk during the assault where she is cowering in fear. After he gives that great speech, and then she just comes finger tutting out of those barn doors, and the little motif of the Avengers theme starts playing. That is a perfect use of the score to me. But you're right, there's nothing new, nothing is novel, and it really is frustrating for me because biasly, I do love the theme of Iron Man in Iron Man 3, which is Brian Tyler too. But you're right, nothing felt like it was brought to this movie in terms of the score. So
I can't prove this, but I'm pretty sure they hired Brian Tyler originally because of his work on Dragon Ball Evolution.
Oh my God. This is like bigger tie-ins than any of the Marvel universe. All the Dragon Ball Evolution tie-ins to this episode.
Anton just rolled his eyes so hard.
Anton basically said boo with his eyes.
Oh. Moshin Boo?
Kid Boo.
You kid, boo.
And I really enjoyed the end credits. It looks like claymation. It's pretty cool.
Do you think that was an actual like real, statue somebody put up in the MCU 616 world?
I hope so.
That would be sick. Because, like in the Battle of New York, they have the plaque that commemorates all the Avengers. I wonder, like in Sokovia, do they just have the 6 Avengers fighting like 20 robots?
Don't they hate them in Sokovia?
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Sokovia hates the Avengers.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice there's a GPS map zoom in on Sokovia in the film? I was trying to figure out, like, where is Sokovia in Eastern Europe?
If you had to put it somewhere, I feel like they're eating a lot of borscht.
North of like Poland and west of Lithuania.
Like
So and then
Belarus or something like that?
yeah, like a weird northwest corner before like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Some weird Slavic area,
If
basically.
any of the
No offense
listeners
to
are
the
from
Slavs.
Sokovia and would like to tell us where their country is located on the fictional map, write in and tell us.
In the comics, Pat, they were the twins were actually born on Wundagore Mountain, which is a really fun place
Yeah.
to say.
It sucks there.
It's where the Darkhold is in the MCU. I wouldn't want to live there. It sounds like
It
a really bad place to live.
Yeah, the
really
crime rate.
sucks.
Yeah.
The crime rate,
Yeah.
the climate, the evil magic. Yeah, not really great for anyone.
The finger things that they're doing.
Finger tutting, baby.
Next reason why this wasn't better, the story. We were beginning to get into this. My primary problem with this film is that I think it could have been 30 minutes shorter, and I would have liked it more.
This is a movie that could have been 30 minutes shorter or 30 minutes longer, and either of those would have been a better decision than the runtime it was at.
I think you're right.
If you were going to give any particular scene 30 more minutes, or if there are certain bits that should have been more fleshed out, Garrett, what would you want to flesh out?
Motivations of the twins. This is actually, I'm glad we are bringing up that the story is one of the main reasons why it wasn't better. There are many just plot points introduced that are kind of forgotten about or just quickly wrapped up by the end. We know the twins resent the Avengers, especially Iron Man, for basically having a missile embedded in their house and being stuck there for 2 days, which also killed their parents. At the end of the day, Wanda Maximoff is living in her parents' killer's compound, and she seems pretty fine with it. Also, Pietro Maximoff says the worst line in the film of, "So this is what SHIELD is." SHIELD is a world-renowned like terrorist organization at this point in the MCU because Hydra had infiltrated this and this was exposed to the world. So what did he think SHIELD was in the first place? The Red Cross? My point is these characters have motivations that are just so neatly wrapped up or not even explored. So personally, I would have spent a lot more time there. Honestly, just the internal strife of the Avengers 2 is really what makes it click and kind of sets up the plot of Civil War. We really do see that happen a lot during the farm scene, as well as kind of where the Avengers kind of go off to as well. I would love to see what Hulk's vision was. Apparently, it was so dark that none of the viewers got to see that too. So again, spending more time with the characters is where Whedon clearly wanted to go, and he had to get rid of that in service of more action scenes. So again, that's how you get that bloated runtime that again feels really just like empty calories in my opinion.
No, really, really well said, Garrett. And just one thing I'd add there is Hulk's vision was rubble and bodies, and it came true. That's all. I'm sure that's what it was.
Honestly, I like that theory. Pat, what about you? If you could make this movie 30 minutes shorter or longer, what are we cutting or what are we adding?
First things first, I would cut out the cave thing because it didn't make any sense to me anyway. I understand there's context there that both of you know.
That's 2024 context. 2015, Garrett had no idea what was happening in relation to the larger universe.
2015, Anton was trying to create a spider web of how everything was connected.
I would
2015,
also
Anton saw a shirtless Thor shooting lightning out of his body and was like, "My man."
Yeah.
I would also trim down every action sequence. I felt every set piece went on too long. The chase in Korea, I understand there's parts of it, like you highlighted a really cool part, but it's basically a car chase with robots. It's like, didn't need to be 20 minutes.
Also, no one in South Korea seems concerned that there is a giant 8-foot robot on top of a moving truck that starts flying with Captain America fighting him.
Unfazed.
That seems like a pretty big deal.
And I felt the finale, the Battle of Sokovia, it just seemed to drag on forever.
Yeah, for me, it was the Battle of Sokovia. I feel like the choreography for any of the battle scenes within that very lengthy sequence of the film, that's where I felt the most bored. And I don't know if it was because of the stakes of fighting robots didn't feel as exciting as the rest of the film, where it's just more about internal strife and struggle and understanding the characters' relationships with each other.
The Avengers movies, the first two, have a problem of facing an endless horde. And to a viewer, there's not really any stakes in that because, save for getting hurt a little bit, you know the heroes are going to make it out all right in the end. I mean, even Quicksilver's death in this is not caused by the horde itself, but rather Ultron shooting from a Quinjet, basically. So there's no stakes in it. The action feels weightless. And yes, there might be a cool kill or a cool scene here and there, like we talked about with the 360 shot. But again, in service of what? Killing more robots?
It felt more like I was watching through cutscenes of like Dynasty Warriors. It's
That's
just
exact. It feels like a cutscene of a video game or that last level before the final boss battle.
like they're just farming to level up at that point for a lot of those fight scenes in Sokovia. It just feels really grueling.
Story question for you both, because my understanding in the research is that there was a prequel comic that was published before this film's release. Why did the Avengers need to assemble for a raid on Strucker's fortress, but not for something like Malekith wanting to initiate the convergence and kill everyone in the universe?
That is a really great point. And as much as it makes sense of why they had to converge on Strucker, because they're looking for the scepter, which they have made a point of saying
That's a
is
big deal.
kind of the impetus for it. And because Thor needs it to get basically whatever magic Loki was cooking up. You are very right, though. Marvel still had that problem of these are really Avenger related things. How is no one here for this?
Right.
Anton, what were you going to say, though? I want to hear your take on this. Maybe we can talk a
Uh,
little Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in here.
Thor's I don't have anything official, but all I'll say is maybe Thor's hubris. I got this one, guys.
That was one of my questions for you both later. Is like, didn't they get Loki's scepter after the first film? So, like, did they lose it?
No, they put it in the fridge with all of the other, basically, items of war. And then when it was exposed that S.H.I.E.L.D. was being run by Hydra, Hydra basically took the scepter with them.
Well, they don't explain that.
You had to see Captain America, the Winter Soldier, my dude.
I was
That
gonna
was
say,
in the
it was-
Winter Soldier?
Yeah, well, the
Yep.
Winter Soldier is the whole
Oh,
plot is that
I
Hydra
don't
has
remember.
been S.H.I.E.L.D. all
Yeah.
along. So everything
No, I know that,
S.H.I.E.L.D.
but I don't remember
did-
the scepter being taken by Hydra in that
Well, it's in
film.
the first movie after Avengers. It's in
Oh, boy.
S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Thor doesn't take it back with him to Asgard. He just takes the Tesseract and Loki because he
And-
thought it was safe under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s.
but Shield's compromised.
S.H.I.E.L.D. compromised, baby. And it's the same thing. How did they get a helicarrier, too? Well, maybe if they actually acknowledge Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., my boys on ABC were doing some work for the team in Age of Ultron. I love that show so much, and no one else will. And I'm not going to try to convince anyone else in this world to watch it because it's a fool's errand.
I've
You
never
big-
seen it.
You a big Haley Atwell fan?
Am I a big Haley Atwell fan? I don't want to tell you the amount of sobbing I was doing at the end of Endgame. My wife comes home, and of course she comes home right during, spoiler alert, even though this isn't a spoiler, Tony Stark's death scene. And she's like, how'd he die? And I'm like, so this is what you're going to come in and sit down
She's
and watch
never
with me?
seen it?
No, she hasn't seen it.
Oh,
So she just straight up spoils it for herself and watches all the other subsequent 30 minutes. And then she just looks up at me and just sees me sobbing as Steve and Peggy are having that dance finally. It gets
Damn.
me every time, man. It really does. That relationship
it's great.
hits me right in the feels,
It
man.
pays
I'd-
off so well.
I'd want more Agent Carter in my life.
Oh, it was a shame that ABC canceled that after 2 seasons because that was just great primetime television.
Yeah, one of our pugs is named after Agent Carter. Agent Peggy Carter. So
Margaret. Is it we know it's not Margaret, but if you named your dog Margaret, that would be hilarious.
Huey.
Yeah, so Pat, any other questions about tie-ins that you were too lazy to pay attention to?
Oh, I'll get to them. Don't worry. Let's continue to plow down on the story here. Yeah, this does to me feel like 90 minutes that they're stretching out into 150, 140, however
Mhm.
long this is. On the other hand, there are parts of it that really do look like a comic book come to life, which is, of all the comic book movies that I've seen, not many of them have achieved that. And I have to give the movie a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, one of the things that really stuck out to me was costuming. I feel like even looking at the first film, they did a good job of being able to transition a compromise between realism and comic book aesthetic. I was very, very happy to see how they came up with the vision in this film and the costuming there to kind of create that very believable, just if we were in a grounded reality or as close to grounded as we can, what does it look like? So adding that into the elements of the story really helped me feel like this is an Avengers adventure. So I love that part.
The character beats in the story is what works so well in this movie. The party scene, the farmhouse scene, feeling like you're even worthy enough to be an Avenger, I think is a great, just piece to actually mine in a second movie for your middle movie. But again, it loses a lot of, I think, that, narrative oomph in favor of these weightless action scenes that we were talking about too. But Pat, to your point before, and Anton, I want to hear your take on this. I feel like this is easily the nerdiest and most comic book Marvel movie ever. I mean, there is a scene at the end where three characters are shooting laser beams out of their arms, hammers, and heads at a giant vibranium made robot, and robots are discussing what it means to live and the fate of humanity. Like, I'm sorry, that is just pure comic book nerd everything.
Yeah, look, we're at the end of the day, we're talking about a comic book property, and nerds will thrive because of it. But Age of Ultron is definitely a nerd first kind of film, and I feel like in terms of the comic book appeal, Ultron's a very obscure villain because when you really think about it, you compare it to other superhero villains, and it's a very nuanced villain to kind of come to the big screen, because you have to force the audience to understand what actually goes into, Ultron the villain, that he is actually basically a foil of Tony Stark in mind, but actually has the abilities to overtake the full Avengers. He's not just your typical, Saturday morning cartoon villain. So there's an added layer of like, we have to have a respect for who he is as a villain. I feel like in terms of, is this something out of the comic books? Yes, I could see this being like a 6 issues in like an Avengers story run of, we're going to see the Avengers take on Ultron, and issue 5 is when they finally figure out what they're going to do before they do it in issue 6.
You're so right about that too. It honestly really does feel like a 6-issue comic book run series. Maybe that's what the age is. 6 comic books, basically. Just 6 issues, no more, no less.
It definitely feels self-contained compared to, I think, where the MCU was up until that point. And that's why I mentioned how confused I was by the mid-credit scene with Thanos. I'm like, wait, what does this have to do with that overarching storyline? It turns out it has a lot to do with it. We just didn't know it at the time.
But it really does make you feel like you're asking yourself, then why did I sit through all of this for?
Side quest.
Exactly, which I don't think a post-credit should do, and I don't think a movie should ever do to itself. It's not, I don't want to say it's insulting to the audience, but it is a little like, we know you'll be back for more. You don't really care that this was your villain of the week, basically, is kind of what you are saying to the audience with a post-credit scene like that. Or that's at least how I viewed it when I watched it again yesterday.
Yeah, I still stand by this. There's a much better film in this movie that's a more solid, tight film about heroes realizing they are worthy. And you could, if you strip this movie down and you focus on that, it's a great movie that is just another adventure in the tales of the Avengers. But because there's a great architecture around what are the different phases of the MCU and wanting to move that forward, there's no allowance for that.
And the last thing I do want to say about this too, the plot within the story, I think we can all agree, is very filler, very empty calories, but the character moments, the dialogue, and the interactions with the characters are all top tier. I wish we were in less locales. I wish we weren't fighting hordes of robots. But again, just to have what it means to feel worthy, to kind of talk, am I a monster because of these things that happened to me? And also, I do think it's such a disservice that Scarlett Johansson had to say words that she's a monster because she can't have babies. Like, I don't know, that is very reductive gender politics, but I don't need to talk about that, but that is a quick digression there.
It's a strange decision to put that in the
Very
film.
strange decision.
Very strange dialogue. I think, of course,
as I compliment the dialogue, of course, then I find the one thing that like rankles me the most. But my point is like there are so many individual parts in this movie that hum and work so well and set up so many great things to come in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it just feels a little hollow and empty inside. And I think we can attribute that to not only the story that was written, but also Joss Whedon, the director, and the Marvel machine, and them just being oil and water on this film.
So I'll make one more point where I think Joss Whedon knew
Josh?
proper.
Joss Whedon.
Yeah, Joss Whedon.
His nicer twin brother.
Yes, nice twin brother.
knows story, and I will give credit for, in that there's a strong understanding that there's really one, in terms of story writing, we can always say what defines a hero, but we can always ask that question, what defines worthiness? But of course, Thor has it in his hands. He literally has the objective object of, this is what defines who is worthy. If you can lift this object, you are worthy. And there's so much to see there around all these flawed characters that are asking their own questions and struggles of being able to lift it. And it's actually really hilarious. And every single thing written in, whether it's Captain America making it jiggle a little bit,
Best
Iron
moment in
Man,
the film.
or Iron Man,
Thor's
yeah,
Thor's just look on his
yeah.
face when it moves that little bit is some of the best acting from Chris Hemsworth in the
It's
MCU.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
That's why I will always argue Hemsworth is a good actor. He almost panics.
Yeah, it's so good.
Age of Ultron is when they let Thor be a little bit funny, and
Yeah.
thank God Taika Waititi was like, you know what, I'm gonna make it really hum now with Ragnarok. We're not talking about
Yeah.
Love and Thunder for right now for very obvious reasons, but he figured out what worked for him in Age of Ultron and dialed it up to 11 in the best possible way for,
Yeah.
I think, the character.
And just to, think about how do you build catharsis for those characters or even tie it together is just having Vision, which is a representation of overcoming fear of the unknown, being able to bring together how can you even become a hero when there's a questioning of doubt, and objectively being able to pick up the hammer himself was very impressive. So I think, I think there are a lot of parts here that show really strong understanding of story writing, character development, and plot. It's just too bogged down by a lot of fluff.
Yeah. Anton, you got me thinking on a good point too. When Vision picks up Mjolnir, which is still one of the funniest and greatest scenes and one of the best character shots of everyone's just stunned reactions, it's not that he's worthy and deserves to pick up the hammer. It's more that he's even conflicted. He wants to destroy Ultron, not because of who he is, but what he will do.
Mhm.
He's kind of saying to the Avengers, it's not about whether you're worthy or not. It's about doing the right thing, which you guys want to do. So let's go. We don't have time to waste. And I think that is such a great scene and impetus for the characters to be who they are. So again, maybe we don't like the plot and the story itself told on screen, but the characters, how they're written and how they interact with each other. And I guess some of the journey that they go on sans the actual mind quest they go on via Wanda, very well done in this movie.
Mhm.
Well, the character interaction is the best part about this film.
Yes.
Before I forget, though, Anton, you were mentioning the costumes. Just for you, I looked up what kind of watch Downey's wearing in this film.
Okay, what do we got?
It's a Porsche design world timer.
That's so sick. My gosh.
And it's attainable for us normal folks if you have $2,500 to $4,000.
Yeah, it's attainable.
It's attainable.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay rent, but yeah, that's attainable.
Yeah. Just skip your rent for a couple months and yeah,
Exactly.
sure.
It's more attainable than the Audi R8 right now for me.
What a cool car.
Such a cool car.
Every time I see these movies, I'm like, what a cool car.
When they show that concept in the first Iron Man, I'm like, God damn, you got me, Marvel.
Quick sidebar, and then I'll get back to the character interactions. I promise I'll make this quick. So around the time the first or second Iron Man came out, I was in Atlantic City, and some guy pulled up in front of one of the casinos with the Iron Man colored R8.
So
And he
cool.
got out. He was looking very proud of himself. And then someone pulled up behind him in the exact same car with the exact same color scheme. And I have never seen such a look of anger and disappointment on someone's face in my life, because everyone who was outside of the casino laughed at the first guy.
Oh, that sucks. If he had just come 5 seconds earlier, oh man, or later, excuse me, I should say that.
Like, he looked like someone just shot his dog.
Where was this again?
Atlantic City.
All right. Still on my
That
list of
place is
places
a
to go.
metaphor for like shooting your dog. You don't want to go there, Anton.
I told you it would be quick. Back to the film. I was completely bored by almost every action sequence in this film. But what saves it for me is the dialogue is some of the best in the entire MCU. And you really have to rewatch it because it's easy to miss a lot of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
I will be reinstituting Prima Nocta.
Very underrated line.
The most under the radar funny line in the whole MCU, now that I'm thinking about it more.
A kid's not going to know what that means.
It's funny how Disney owned Marvel at this point, and it's just in the film. They either didn't know what it meant or they didn't care, and they just figured most people wouldn't know what it meant.
Well, as Ultron says, you got no strings on me.
Right.
Very nice, Anton.
The other one, also said by Tony, you and Banner better not be playing hide the zucchini.
So funny.
Whedon was really cooking on a lot of this. I love it when, also said by Tony. Tony gets the best lines in this film when he says to Nick Fury, It's been a very long day, like Eugene O'Neill long.
You know
So
who else
great.
has amazing quips in this? Cap. He's actually one of the
Mhm.
Yeah.
funnier characters in this movie. One of the less serious people. The one scene I love is during the final fight when he and Thor are fighting on the bridge, and I forget who calls over the earpiece. They're like, "Is everything okay there?" And he just goes, "It is not okay. We are definitely not okay." Like just pummeling a robot, just like dropping them into a car. I just think is hilarious too, because in the previous Captain America movie, he's so stoic and so serious in these types of fights, and now he's just dropping one-liners, kneeing people in the face, yelling "Come on" at Ultron while fighting him on a truck. I'm like, all right, Steve, let's go, get quippy with it.
The Winter Soldier changed him, man.
It really did.
Mhm.
Anton, I know we technically shouldn't cover that film because it's so good,
Man,
but
we talked about this before of just like
we have.
how they got it so right with Winter Soldier.
We actually have to cover it. Remember, one of our guests apparently has problems with it?
Right. Yeah.
We might have to force his hand.
Was it like F.
Interesting.
Gary Gray and his resentment for not directing it?
I don't know what his problem is with the movie because that movie is like universally well liked, right? Like who doesn't like Winter Soldier? This person who will remain nameless for now.
I'm sure they're a nice person, but
They are. So is that it, Anton? Do we now have to cover it?
I think that we should, just because we can also cover whatever movie we like.
That's a good point.
hey, you have no strings on you.
You're damn right we don't. I wish I had said this to you earlier, Anton, but I'll come back to it. You were asking Garrett, what scenes would you like to see more of? I wanted more out of Tony and Fury's conversation in the barn.
Mhm.
It felt like it was cut short, and it was
Yes.
great dialogue. It was great acting. You get a real rare moment of vulnerability from Tony. He almost basically breaks down and confesses to Fury what he saw and how it affected him. He would never show that kind of vulnerability in front of the rest of the team. He has too much pride. But he doesn't have that kind of pride around Fury, and it's interesting.
It's interesting because, we talked about it before, Robert Downey Jr., and we're getting Oscar level talent in a comic book movie. And I think this is where you can look at these kind of comic book movies and say, we have so much appreciation. This is up leveling them. The standard is different because of scenes like this.
The one thing I really want to say too is Iron Man 3, I feel like is kind of forgotten for this movie. Not less than
That was a
Tony
question I had for you later.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're probably going to get into that, so I'm going to
Yeah.
pause it. But I will say, one of my personal favorite aspects of Iron Man 3 is a lot of the kind of soul searching and introspection that Tony does, especially with Pepper too. Like, he really is scared, really reckoning with what's happened to him in New York and asking, am I worthy of this? Like, is it the suit that makes me, or am I the one that makes the suit? He has this real crisis of faith and identity too. And again, it's really built upon very well with Fury. And I agree with you, Pat. Like, that's a scene like I wish there was so much more of too. And just Fury in general, which is basically a glorified cameo in this
Mhm.
movie, because really those moments of vulnerability, Barton with his wife, Tony with Fury, that's really what makes the movie sing, because there's not a lot of humans in this movie if you really think about it. So having the humanity really exposed with the Avengers really does deepen all of the characters and the appreciation for them in the story itself.
More Paul Bettany.
More Paul Bettany.
So
God, he
happy.
delivers lines with such gravitas.
So when I first saw it, I had not a clue what Vision was. So it was a pretty effective turn for him to show up. I'm like, oh, Paul Bettany's going to be like a real character in this now. Pleasantly surprised.
Good for him. You make that money, Paul Bettany.
Yeah. I hope he got a nice raise. He got upgraded from voice actor to, I assume, wearing a green suit with a bunch of CGI. Otherwise, that would be a heck of a lot of makeup to sit through.
He definitely did the face makeup. I remember seeing that in
Oh, he did?
behind
Okay,
the scenes featurettes. But yeah, I highly doubt they painted all of his body in vibranium red weave.
Do you think it would have been more effective if one of the Avengers had died during the finale? Because I didn't care when Quicksilver died. I was like, okay,
I was going to say
I'm shaking my head.
that's too
I'm
bad.
shaking my head no, because let's be honest, they really do pull a fast one on you, making you think that Barton, Hawkeye, is going to die. We're showing his family. We're talking. We're
Right.
showing how he's mortal in the first scene too. So it was really set up. And I remember the whole time watching it the first time, I was like, don't kill Hawkeye. He's basically the glorified cameo at this point of the Avengers. Like, that's just a cheap kill. So it's the same for me when they killed Pietro. It just felt like Disney saying, now we don't have to worry about having A, a speedster in the universe, and B, competing with the X-Men movies. So, in short, I don't think it would have been better, and I don't think the one they killed did anything great for the story or the movie itself.
I can't think of an Avenger that would have made sense to have died in the film.
Hawkeye.
I feel like it was a bit more at that point in the film. There isn't enough to say that this was his film that it would have felt very hurtful to see him, die.
Yeah, he did get a nice due here. Speaking
It
of
really
a character I
is.
never expected to have a family, he was one of them.
I know. It is actually a great point, too, when Clinton's introducing the Avengers to his wife. It's like, this is an agent of some kind about Laura and the kids, and these are smaller agents. Such a great line.
That is a
Also,
good
a great
line.
little payoff, too, in the Hawkeye show, where it is revealed that Laura Barton was an agent once upon a time.
Right. That's another one I'm too lazy to watch.
Honestly, pretty enjoyable.
It's a
Good
great-
Christmas time show.
I was in a great Christmas time show. Christmas in
Great
New York.
Christmas time.
Ooh,
Christmas in New York. Can't beat it.
All right, maybe I'll have to.
Christmas in New York. Everyone loves a Christmas in New York.
We do.
And Wilson Fisk in a Hawaiian shirt.
Haley Steinfeld's also Jewish in the TV show. Kate Bishop.
Is she actually Jewish?
She's got a menorah. Maybe in real life. I should check that. I should know if she's a member of the
All
tribe.
right, gotta
I'm
check
letting
the
my
Adam
brothers down.
Sandler database.
Yes, please Google it too. But she does have a menorah in the background of that show. And all I had to say was, yes, we got one. And no, I don't mean it in the bad way. I mean, like, yes, we have
Can you
representation.
name 5 Jewish superheroes?
Moon Knight.
Yep.
He's one.
Yeah.
Kate Bishop is one.
Sandy Koufax.
Sandy Koufax. Sean Green. And Sage Rosenfels. In the NFL.
Can't forget Ben Grimm.
Ben Grimm. Oh my God. Duh.
Yeah.
He has
Ben
a great
Grimm.
Hanukkah episode in Spider-Man from the 90s. I'm laughing so much because we used to watch this in school all the time.
Yep, big Jewish character.
Wait, don't say it. I'm going to think about this. I mean, technically Scarlet Witch.
It's true. That's
Magneto,
true.
obviously.
Right.
Number one.
Baron von Strucker? No, probably not.
No, very much a Nazi.
No,
Very
just
much
kidding.
Nazi.
No,
Very
no.
much a Nazi.
Nope.
Oh, I'm an idiot. Kitty Pryde. Duh.
Yep. Another big one.
Yeah, Quicksilver sucks in this movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, not great.
It was at this point too, we already had a lot of writing from the Ultimate Universe and the 616 universe. All I'm saying is I'm really glad they didn't go with the Ultimate Universe timeline for the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
Why, is it a little incestual or something weird?
It's not a little.
Is that right?
It's not a little.
You serious?
Yeah, I'm like not even kidding. There's a reason they destroyed the Ultimate Universe.
That also makes it even weirder knowing that Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen were husband and wife in 2014's Godzilla movie too. Ugh.
Is that why they're holding hands at the beginning of this film?
I really don't want to look at it that way.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw the movie, I thought they were a couple, and then I found out later they were brother
So
and
did
sister.
I.
I'm like, why were they holding hands? They're adults. Like that's
So did I. remember turning to my friend. I'm like, oh, look, their characters from Godzilla live on as a couple in Marvel. How fun. Oh, ew. Yeah, so you're not the only one. Pat.
So let's get back to this. And I have a question. This is where my questions for you are really going to start, because we're going to move into the next reason, which is Ultron himself. But so they have a grudge against Tony Stark. He just made the weapons, though. He didn't bomb their country. Maybe start with the people that bombed the country.
Nobody cares who drops the bombs. They just cared that they were dropped. So they don't know who dropped the bomb, but they see Stark.
Yeah, but it wasn't Stark Enterprises. Stark Enterprises didn't bomb Sokovia.
Of course not, but you get kind of the point that I'm trying to say. That's what their 10-year-old brains saw. That's what their 10-year-old brains know. And
but they're not 10. They're older.
Well, look.
When the bombs were dropped, they were little kids.
Aaron Taylor Johnson looks like someone that if you threw a rock at him, he'd be mad at rocks, okay? Like,
look, can I just say, Anton?
He looks like he has a problem with rocks.
I am very glad he's not going to be the next James Bond after seeing this film. It's not happening.
He's a funny actor. I don't know if he's going to...
Craven the Hunter.
He's not James Bond.
Is he for sure not James Bond?
I don't think so. I think that petered out.
No,
on the vine. The guy moved or something. I don't know.
Jury's out. Who's it going to be?
It's going to be really interesting kind of listening back to this, because when this releases, Craven the Hunter will also exist in the cultural zeitgeist of movies.
Is that an MCU thing?
No one's going to watch it.
It's a Sony-verse movie, like
so it'll suck.
And Madam Web. Yeah.
Did you see Rhinos in it?
Boy, did I. I like the guy who directed, J.C. Shander.
He's a great director.
Great.
I
Great
appreciate
director.
Russell
Most
Crowe
Violent
being in it.
Year. Yeah, Russell Crowe's in it. Oh, great. Wasn't he in the Mummy movie as kind of like an
He
evil,
was.
older
He was Nick
mentor?
Fury. No,
He's
he
in
was Nick
he's in
Fury.
the paycheck phase of his career.
Right. Yes. Oh, good. Hey, Russell, get your paychecks, bro.
Look, we love Russell Crowe on this podcast.
We love Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
This is a pro Russell Crowe. We're Russell Pro. Make your money. Thor Love and Thunder. Make your money, Russell Crowe. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
All right, Ultron.
Ultron.
What was Tony's original plan for Ultron?
Protect
He
the world.
wanted, yeah, to protect the world, but he wanted Ultron to run the Iron Legion because Jarvis was currently doing it.
Okay.
Keep going. Let's just do this like rapid fire style.
Yeah, so
like
that's-
$1 million pyramid.
So his whole clean slate thing at the end of Iron Man 3, just to pretend that never happened.
Nope.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
He destroyed all 42 of his suits, or I guess 41 of his suits, just to build a legion of drones.
300 more.
Exactly.
And a space satellite that appeared in Endgame.
And a Quinjet that can...
Dude never stopped building, okay? He never stopped building.
So that can fly to other planets, is that correct?
I don't know. He's a mechanic.
It's basically the Concorde, but it can fly to other planets.
Ooh.
Both of you already answered. How did Strucker get his hands on the Loki scepter? It's just not explained in this film. What exactly did Thor see that caused him to zap Vision to life? Because it was not explained to me well in the film. He's just like, I had a vision.
Anton, what's your take on this?
I have honestly no vision on my end for how that one was explained because I was just also
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, my theory over here. Let's roll with this too. So when Thor has his little vision, he sees the 4 Infinity Stones up to that point that were introduced. And within his vision, it is kind of shown, but not really, but it can be assumed that somebody is collecting the stones and Thor knows about these stones and all the destruction that they can unleash upon the world. So his idea is that the stone is in the scepter, which he sees in his vision, and the stone is in the Avengers' hands because they have the cradle. Therefore, the stone is safest in the Avengers' hands too. And even Thor kind of makes a point of it too towards the end, before he says goodbye, is saying if he can lift the hammer, he can keep the stone too. So that's my 2 cents on it. It was basically just part of his vision saying that better safe with him than anyone else.
That's a very that's very in depth for not quite as long of a scene.
That's all
Like,
that's
okay.
the only because I actually did think about this too. Like I paused the scene, like even to see if there's like little glimpses of like Thanos holding the gauntlet or something. But that's the only explanation in my mind that just makes sense.
My mind went to memes. It was Thor was thinking of the soundtrack to Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Oh yeah. He wants to take you on a ride.
Yeah.
What do we think
That-
of Ultron in this film?
He never wins any confrontation he has with the Avengers, if you
Under-
think about it.
Underutilized.
Yeah, I love James Spader's performance. I think he was a great choice for the character, especially if you're going to make him, essentially a dark, twisted version of Tony Stark, who's very quippy.
Mm-hmm.
Spader is a very charismatic actor, and I think he was the perfect choice for that. But he's constantly running away. 1 minute, he's this terrifying Skynet-powered murder robot, and the next, he's just a whiny little bitch who's constantly running away. I couldn't figure him out.
It is really telling that the most intimidating he ever felt was that opening scene when he's in that mangled Iron Legion corpse within the tower too. That's easily where he was the most terrifying and actually felt the most formidable.
That scene definitely bordered on horror.
It's awesome.
There are some great
scene.
moments of horror in this film too. Tony exploring the caves in the castle, finding the layer of atrocities basically in the Hydra compound.
Yeah,
all of the visions.
Yeah, the Vision death orgy in Valhalla.
Oh yes, Valhalla, you could
Yeah.
say.
Anton, I think they were inspired by Steven Seagal's visions On Deadly Ground.
Oh.
In the Eskimo camp when he's recovering.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
Joss
that's
actually said in
obviously
an
what they
interview.
saw to write this.
That's what
Yeah.
Joss said in a 2015 interview with Ain't It Cool News.
Yeah. A lot of people disrespect Steven Seagal, but I always thought On Deadly Ground, which was his only directorial feature, was just a masterpiece. Zabba, zabba, zabba.
They were all on ayahuasca, that's for sure.
Ultron definitely was smoking some ayahuasca because he was wilding out at some parts in the movie. I will say one of the funniest scenes in the movie too is just when he gets so mad at who we haven't even talked about yet, Andy Serkis's
Yeah.
Ulysses Claw, calling him Tony Stark, and he just gets so mad that he chops his whole arm off and then immediately apologizes. That is
Oh,
just
sorry.
it's just hilarious that he's so
Yeah.
mad and then so apologetic in one moment to the next.
So, I mean,
It
like,
does feel
Spader's great.
Vader's
Yeah.
great. You're so right. And that's why we're in a lesser actor, Ultron feels even lighter than he does. And I think in even a lesser director with characters, this movie feels a lot more grating and bloated than it might seem already to some.
I like the bit too when the twins turn on him and flee, and he's just like, "Wait, guys!" Just
It is really ridiculous that, we don't really expect, I think, still at this point from Marvel that their villains are all the greatest or really mining a lot of depth. I mean, we saw guys like Ronan and Malekith
Mhm.
in Phase 2, which are essentially cannon fodder. But again, we talk about this already. I mentioned this, Pat, you mentioned this. He's an angrier version of Tony Stark and basically wants to crush his father and by extension the entire world. But he really doesn't change. He doesn't really have his ideas challenged by anyone. And the only positive connections he has with people are the Maximoff twins who run off, and he's immediately antagonizing the Avengers too. So there really isn't any growth or really any way for like the audience to relate to this villain too, which it's one thing when it's Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor the Dark World, but your second Avengers movie, not great.
Very different from the quips that you get from a villain like Loki. I think like Loki's quips, also very smart character. And then even compared to Thor, who also is very like I think it's underrated how funny Thanos can be. Thanos, how very underrated Thanos, how funny Thanos can be. But I think there is a benefit to having a character like Ultron be a bit different, whether it's from a perspective of having some sharp wit, being a bit comedic. I like that tone just because sometimes it's having a character that can be a bit, how should I say, almost can change on a dime, which displays how crazy he is, and at the same time with a tone so light. I think it can be enjoyable, but also not enough depth given to the character that can allow us to really connect with him.
And one moment that really should play a lot harder is the first time we're introduced to Ultron. It's in the digital world where he essentially kills Jarvis. And the final scene of Ultron 2 is really Ultron and Vision having a beautiful, honestly, conversation about the fate of humanity, which is hilarious. Robots discussing the fate of humanity. We love it. We love to see it. And Vision being the one to destroy Ultron at the end, who is just so desperate and trying to cling on to anything still. It really should be great bookended moments. But yeah, the character in between that, the insides of this sandwich, not as good as the bread here.
it's always challenging when your villain's a robot.
Yes.
Yeah, which is why, like in the comic, Ultron is more than just a
Right.
robot.
Right.
And we don't really get to see the more than, besides he wants nuclear codes and he wants to destroy the world. So what? We've seen that a million times before. as
In one
moviegoers.
in one Iron Man storyline, Ultron convinced people that he was Iron Man's mentor in the comic book Yinsen, and created a full cult of people trying to then turn themselves into cybernetic, half human, half cyber beings. And because he's so charismatic, and then he does the big reveal, actually I'm Ultron and now I'm going to kill you, Tony Stark. So if that sounds something out of a comic book and maniacal, that is. But look, Ultron's very all over the place in the comic books, but just a robot he is not.
I thought there was a real missed opportunity with him too, especially when they established early on he could be anywhere at any time, all over the net. They could have done so much for that. You know, like they
I've
say
seen that
like
before.
I've seen it before, but like, oh, he's trying to get into the nuclear codes, but thankfully that's not going to happen.
Okay.
They
First
could
off,
have done. What if he like shut down the power grid, tapped into a nuclear power plant, and like did a meltdown? He doesn't do anything except at the end what he's trying to do in Sokovia. Like there was just a lot of different. There was just a bunch of car chases.
it's escalation and Ultron determining what is kind of the level of impact that he wants to make. But then from a story writing perspective, and what if the AI is going to take on or going to get to the nuclear codes? Well, then, my friend, all you need to watch is the Digimon movie.
I had a sneaking suspicion you were going to bring up the Digimon movie because you got way too excited.
Because I love the Digimon movie.
Oh, dude, the
I
Digimon movie
didn't
rules.
I didn't go there, but yeah.
I do want to say though, Pat, to your point too, like why doesn't he do more? The movie does try to quickly explain why he can't get the nuclear codes or go a little quote unquote deeper into the net. And
Right.
it's because the remains of Jarvis are stopping him. But you're right. Like there's still a lot that I think he could have done. Change some traffic lights and disrupt traffic patterns in large cities and cause some car
Yeah, like
crashes.
I'm looking at this like of just a missed opportunity. If he wants to really undermine the Avengers, right? He doesn't do anything to distract them. Think about all the distractions that he could have caused, forcing them to deal with other things so that he would be unopposed to execute on his plan. But I guess they also explain that at the end. They're like, well, he wants you to come fight him. It's like, all right.
But you also bring up a great point because the whole reason for Ultron is existing is Tony Stark and Bruce Banner saying, there's so many things going on in the world and we can't be everywhere at once. So let's create the Iron Legion. That's the whole point of it, is so they can be everywhere at once. And it's amazing because the movie could have just subverted that and basically caused, for lack of better words, an Age of Ultron with this Iron Legion around the world that the Avengers can't stop because they can't be anywhere, or excuse me, they can't be everywhere all at once, too. You're right. There's nothing mined from his omniscience and omnipotence, really. There's no Age of Ultron. It's Weekend at Ultron's.
Also,
Weekend at Ultron's. We go to Ultron's. It is Weekend at Ultron's, actually.
watching this too, I know that there is a little rectification for this in Civil War, but Tony does not get nearly enough blame for what he causes in this film. He tries to project his guilt onto the rest of the Avengers. That's how we get the Sokovia Accords. Why do none of the other Avengers push back? Especially even like Steve Rogers. Like, why doesn't he be like, hey man, like actually like you created Ultron. That's completely your fault. I had nothing to do with that. In fact, we helped clean up your mess.
I mean, there is a
So-
bit of dialogue in the series where they do bring up Ultron.
But you understand what I'm asking though? Like not enough. Like this is 100% on Tony. This has nothing to do with, well, he basically peer pressures Bruce Banner into doing it, right? Peer pressure.
The
But like
second time with Vision, for sure, yes.
this isn't on Captain America. This isn't on Black Widow. This isn't on War Machine. This isn't on Hawkeye. This isn't on anyone else but Tony. This is all Tony's fault.
One thing I will say, it is explored a lot during the farmhouse scene. And again, the little mini Civil War that they have before activating Vision. The line that, or the conversation that Stark and Rogers has is when they're chopping wood and Rogers is just going to town on those trunks with those trunks of arms. Ladies, am I right? When Stark and Rogers are chopping wood like Anton, Tony Stark goes, you know Ultron's trying to tear us apart, right? Rogers goes, well, I guess you know. Whether you tell us is a bit of a question. Banner and I were doing research that would affect the team. That would end the team. Isn't that the mission? Isn't that the why we fight? So we get to go home? Rogers hits a great line. Every time someone tries to win a war before it starts, innocent people die. Every time. And that is such a great conversation. But after that, you're right. Then they're just buddy, team. And Tony really isn't reckoning with the guilt or kind of the issue of creating Ultron anymore until a little bit in Civil War and a throwaway line in Endgame.
I find it interesting how Civil War, which I really is a film that I really love, but they don't really address this, that Tony just tries to project his guilt onto everyone else and tries to make everyone else pay for what he's done.
It's because Tony's always a little bit right and a lot of bit wrong. And I think a lot of people tend to give him a lot of slack for the little bit of right within there, at least within the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I agree with you there, Garrett. I'd also just argue what Tony is pushing with the Sokovia Accords is himself also volunteering, like, I will subjugate myself to this. We must all do this for the better of, humanity kind of thing. It's not like he's just trying to push others to do something that he's not going to participate in.
But I think you're making Pat's point for him there.
Yeah.
Isn't that him just projecting his guilt onto others still?
It's true, but I think that that's where others can kind of see it and say, well, you're owning up to your fault in this.
It's a little bit of both, but him trying to make all of them else accountable for his mistakes is kind of crazy.
Again, it goes to the idea of he does a little bit of good and a lot of bit of bad.
Too. You know whose side I'm on in Civil War. I think you know.
Tony Stark.
That's right.
Tony Stank. Tony Stank.
Tony Stank. Is that from Civil War, that line?
Yes.
That's a
The
great
end.
one.
After Rhodey can't walk with his broken legs, they're like, hey, quip time.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, Vision. What are you doing?
Vision does whatever the plot tells him to do, just like Wanda Maximoff, and that's why
I
they get
always
together.
thought that he is Dr. Giroux's greatest creation.
Sorry, I almost just cursed on the pod. I almost just oh fuck.
I was saving that one. You're welcome.
All right,
Oh, that's fine.
one other thing I do want to say, maybe why wasn't this better? Could this movie, instead of introducing so many new people, could it have just utilized the existing ones? Would you have maybe rather seen more War Machine and Falcon, less the twins? Speaking out loud here, that's a quick example off the top of the head. I don't think the answer is yes, but what do you think about the inclusions of people like War Machine, for example, in this? Too much, too little? Why is he even here?
Too little.
Yeah, I
do
like
I want to? Do I think that there should be more new characters to get me excited? Yeah, I think that's the fun with each new Marvel movie is a new character.
That lineup at the end is pretty sparse.
Yeah.
Did you guys want the Spider-Man cameo here?
No.
No, there was
No.
no.
Same with Captain Marvel. A cameo for the sake of cameo is just
I think
not it, Chief.
I don't know your guys' thoughts on this around when an audience wants something or when they ask for something, but or they receive something versus knowing they want something. Like I didn't know I wanted Spider-Man in Civil War until I got it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In which case, like, hey, yeah, this was great. Would I have thought it would have fit like it did in the comics, but I wouldn't have been mad if it wasn't. I think it made it better.
You know what the thing is, though? Because Spider-Man's appearance is in service of the story. You could write a different Civil War, not have Spider-Man, and you can write around those scenes. Marcus and McFeely wrote however many drafts of Civil War before Spider-Man was properly in Marvel's bullpen. But again, Spider-Man has service to the story. There's reason for him being there. If Spider-Man or Captain Marvel showed up at the ends in the Avengers compound, they're just there to be there. It's in service of nothing.
That's true.
Disney Channel Spider-Man.
I watched Homecoming and I get what you mean, Pat. Does kind of feel like a
Disney Channel movie.
Family friendly Disney Channel.
I mean, the notes that were given to the directors, writers, and everybody in between was make a John Hughes movie. It's no secret to anybody.
So, Garrett, did you know that our good friend Ivan Calixto, friend of the show, he's worked on some Spider-Man movies?
I did not know that. Friends of the show, friends of mine, and friends of the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, apparently.
Yeah.
He's already recorded an episode with us, buddy.
Yeah.
Not a Spider-Man movie, but...
Yeah, but we're going to have him on, because he's worked on, several films, just to kind of tease this out. He's someone that's worked on some Marvel and superhero films, and I'm excited to get his take on why we get the Spider-Man that we get and the limitations that studios put on writing this character. It's fascinating stuff.
Oh, yes. Get his take on Age of Ultron 2 and Iron Man 3. I want to see how we differ or relate with each other.
You could hit him up. He's in Manhattan.
I could hit him up. You're totally right. I could. What's up, Ivan? I'm hitting you up right now.
I love this.
The crossover event of the century.
Yeah, you guys have to build up to a crossover podcast. Just have one Marvel podcast with 19 different people on it, all trying to get one word in.
Civil War.
Yeah, that'll be a real Civil War.
Yeah, it'll be a real Civil War. All right.
There's an idea in here.
I've had a lot of fun talking about this film. We talked about Joss Whedon, the story, Ultron, a bunch of other stuff. It's time to wrap things up and give our ratings, unless either of you have anything to add.
No. Oh, stay away from any fanfics about Ultron on the internet. They're weird.
Duly noted.
I'm not asking more, but I'm so tempted to ask more. We'll take this offline.
Yeah. Garrett, as the guest, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would happily go first. So, before I get into my review of this, again, I think watching this movie with a retrospective lens in 2024 is a way different experience than 2015. So my grade for this is my viewing of this yesterday in 2024 of our Lord and Savior, Tony Stark. So I will say Age of Ultron is not without its faults, but I really do find it to be one of the more rewarding Marvels on rewatch. And really at the time, too, I remember having a different appreciation for it outside of the other Marvel movies that had come up to this point, too. This is the last movie that I can really remember in the Marvel Universe that actually shows the Avengers as a fully formed team, save for Endgame, which even then was pretty chaotic and haphazardly thrown together of their assembling. It has some of the greatest character moments. We really understand all of our core six's characters' motivations, their fears, their just concerns about themselves. And our heroes really feel like regular humans. And I think that is something that Marvel Studios had done so well up to that point, and it really does shine here. Ultron, yes, is underwhelming. Some of the action is very muddled and a bit overlong. And again, I've said it before, but I do not miss that gray and piss filter coloring of superhero movies from this era at all. Again, this is an 150-minute movie that should have either been 180 minutes or 90 minutes long, and neither answer would have been incorrect. But again, there's just a lot of this movie with a lot of ideas stuffed into too little unexplored territory. That being said, I have a great time with it. I always find myself wanting to come back to this film more than recent Marvel movies too. I give this a solid B, bordering on a B plus.
I stand by my statement earlier in the episode that this is a pretty good movie with a great movie within it. I think that if you shave it down because it is way too long, there are so many elements that show you that this is a film that knows about developing character, that knows about strong dialogue, that is able to display elements of a tighter and more effective film and exploring themes that are really interesting and fun for what it really is, just an adventure in the tales of the Avengers. So James Spader does an awesome job as the voice and with his depiction of Ultron. While we don't have a fully fleshed out Ultron, I think that in a different universe there is a focus on being able to make an effective story under 2 hours. So with a follow-up as a follow-up to the film, to the first Avengers film, and trying to continue that hype and trying to continue that level of quality, it's very difficult. And so I don't want to nitpick too hard, but I find that this film is still enjoyable, but just not quite as captivating because of those faults that we discussed earlier. But I don't think that it makes it a terrible film. I'm going to go ahead and just give this film a B minus.
I'm going to do something new on this podcast, especially because Garret is a guest who's I think is at this point is quite familiar with how I rate films and how I view films, and we've talked about a couple of Marvel films at this point. I'm going to read what I have written down for my conclusion, and then I want both of you to guess what you think I'm going to rate this film.
I like this game.
I do think this is way too long. A lot of the action I found numbing. It was really dragged out. 140-minute side quest. I think it would have been a much better, tighter version of itself if it was closer to 100 or 110 minutes. James Spader is wonderful as Ultron, but the problem for me as a very casual fan is that Ultron amounts to a movie of the week villain. As a sequel, I think this is satisfactory. I actually think it's aged pretty well.
C plus.
I enjoyed it more now than when I first saw it. I think it's the weakest of the 4 Avengers films, but I give it points for doing mostly what it was trying to do. I can't call it franchise filler, which is what befell a lot of the later Marvel films, I feel like. It's nice to see the Avengers working together, like you said, Garret. You don't see it a lot in this series. The chemistry's great. If you want a comic book come to life on screen, this is probably it, and you'll enjoy it. Compared to the Disney Channel quality of the current MCU, this feels like a masterpiece. Now, I don't actually think this is a masterpiece, but that's where I'm going with this. So Anton's already made his guess. What about Garret?
It's too positive, but I know you. But I'm
What do you
going
mean
to
it's
say
too
B
positive?
minus
What do you mean it's too
because
positive?
I'm a glass half full man. You used very positive language throughout. There wasn't a lot of but after your positive points. You weren't discounting all the nice things you were saying. I'm going to go B minus, but like an 80.3 B minus. So it's closer to a C plus.
So what's your actual guess? B minus?
B minus. B minus.
You're both right. I can't decide. I was going to do C plus or B minus.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say C plus.
Called it.
because it's like
Boo.
pretty. It's like pretty. It's
It's
pretty.
because he's your co-host.
Well, I was trying to think. What else have I given a B minus to? I'm looking through here. It's not a lot. The Towering Inferno,
Breaking the Waves, gave that a B minus.
Halloween 2. I think I gave Thor a B minus. The first
That's
Thor.
fair. That's fair. I think C plus B minus. That's totally fair.
Yeah,
You can
I'm gonna go.
round up based on
I
whoever
think
the
C
teacher is.
plus. It's just long.
We'll call it like a 79.4. You just missed the cutoff of like rounding
Yeah,
up.
there you go. It's
There we go. That's
well
fair.
done, Anton. Man, you sniffed that out real quick.
It's easy.
What did you think
He
I was
knows
going to
ya.
give it before we recorded?
Just about that.
Okay.
Just
He's got
knowing
you
your
read like a
taste.
book.
Just knowing your tastes.
Yeah, he knows me.
Yeah.
He's my co-host.
Yeah.
I feel like
That's
you should
sweet.
know me at this point.
Like
Yeah.
I know your favorite movie's Digimon the
Right.
movie.
Right. Look, I've seen way, way, way worse. This is pretty good. It's just, God, it's long.
Yeah, I have no comment. All right, wait, Pat, rank all 4 Avengers movies. So first Avengers, Ultron, Infinity War, Endgame.
This is last. Probably the first one I'd put third. No. I don't know. I've only seen Endgame once. I just saw it once in the theater. So I would say I'll put Endgame third. I would put the second one or the first one second, and then Infinity War is number 1. Because I was blown away by Infinity War. Because I was like, this is one of the best paced 3-hour films I've ever seen. It was like a nonstop 3-hour thrill ride. And it also gave me the movie we never got, which is the unbelievable lightning in a bottle bickering chemistry between Doctor Strange and Tony, which we only get like 5 minutes of, and I was like, I need a whole movie with this.
That's you and I are on the same page.
Oh, it's wonderful.
That's my favorite part of the movie every time I rewatch it.
They're only arguing for like maybe 5 minutes.
Just give me a buddy comedy with Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and their sidekicks of Spider-Man.
The 2 biggest dicks in the
Wong.
MCU.
Yeah, just get Benedict Wong and Tom Holland there for a little comic relief and just let these 2
So
dicks
fun.
spar. Anton, what's your ranking?
It has to go Infinity War, the first Avengers film, Endgame, and then Ultron.
Yeah, I think I go first Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame, Ultron. As much as I love Ultron, sorry, buddy, you're not in these big leagues. It's a very distant gap between third and fourth.
But I think if you were going to see where it lands on like the A through F scale, they're still high up there, you know?
Oh, yeah. Look, I would be totally happy going home with any of these at 2 a.m., if you know what I mean.
If we were those kinds of shows that
my wife
we
doesn't
have
listen to this, it's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to try to loophole your list and put Civil War as number 1 because that's the best Avengers film. But
Wait, you mean Avengers 2.5?
Yeah, it's.
I agree.
Out
of all of those 5, yeah, Civil War for me is number 1.
They tricked us with that one. They really did.
Hoodwinked us.
Bamboozled.
All right, let me give you one hot take before we sign off here. Falcon is one of my favorite Avengers, and I will hear no slander.
I like Falcon. I love Anthony Mackie.
Yeah, he's cool.
I really hope Brave New World is good. I really do. For him, honestly.
He kind of needs it. Heck, Marvel needs it.
Some red flags of that movie, bud.
Yeah, that is. I am seeing.
I'm telling you. I still think it was a mistake for them to hire Roman Polanski to do the reshoots.
It really was. I just don't get it. Like, they really should have went with their first choice in Joss Whedon.
Are you hyped on Fantastic Four?
I am. I'm really hyped on Thunderbolts, by the way.
Thunderbolts asterisk.
Thunderbolt asterisk.
Is that really the title?
Yes.
Do you think it's going to be Dark Avengers?
If it's not a different title, I don't even know. I'll eat my hat. I don't know. I don't even have a joke to make, because if they stick with that title and don't quote unquote pull a fast one on us, I will be pleasantly surprised, but not really expecting that. We can cut all of this. It's not even my podcast, but I'm telling you guys to cut this. I installed Prima Nocta on editing. That makes no sense. I don't even like that joke. That's really gross, actually.
Such a great line. I still can't believe they let that be in here.
That and Hide the Zucchini, that is like 1-2 most raunchy jokes in Marvel, probably.
Anton, did you know the concept of Prima Nocta is coming up in a future episode very soon?
Pivotal to the plot or just throwaway line?
It's kind of a throwaway line.
Okay, thank God.
Anton, it's the Digimon movie.
Wait, you don't know what movie I'm talking about?
Which one?
Braveheart.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Garrett, you'll like this. We're covering the list of so-called worst Best Picture winners.
When's Crash?
I don't want to do that. I know it's got to be on there, but oh my god,
When's the
so
English
bad.
It's such
patient?
a-
Just recreate the Seinfeld episode about it.
Crash is so dated.
It was dated then.
Yeah.
Dude,
Dated
the
the second it
2000s
came
were
out.
wild. 2000s were wild.
Yeah, we are going to do The English Patient.
Ugh, that movie is interminable.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent movie.
It's a great movie. Speaking of long movies, though,
It's now at the point where it's underrated because of all the backlash from Seinfeld.
it really is. Now, wait.
Yeah.
What's the worst Best Picture winners, too?
Well, the one with the lowest Rotten Tomato score is Out of Africa, which is next week's episode.
Driving Miss Daisy.
That's on the list, yeah.
That's
a
Shakespeare
clunker.
in Love.
That's
Shakespeare in
tough
Love
one.
that's a war crime.
Blindside?
That is. Green
That won
Book.
Best
What are
Picture?
we-
No.
Oh gosh, Dragon Ball
Green Book.
Evolution.
Dragon Ball Evolution, yes.
Yeah, Green
Winner of
Book's on the
2001.
list. Chariots of Fire.
Mhm.
It's Green Book should not have won. That's just so weird.
Gandhi.
To go from Moonlight to Green Book is the greatest whiplash in Oscars history.
It kind of sucks for these movies too, because I wouldn't even say Green Book's a bad movie. It just didn't deserve to win Best Picture. Like
I would watch
there's
it on
nothing wrong with
TNT
Green
at
Book.
Sunday. I would watch
Right.
it on TNT at Sunday at 2 p.m.
We're dragging this one out.
We're dragging.
That's it for this week's
Okay.
edition of Why Wasn't It Better? That was it for Ultron for our season premiere. Garrett, it's always great to have you on. This is a special one.
Honestly, it's just a pleasure to be here. And just like humans, I find grace in all of our failings when we try to make funny jokes
Even Green
or
Book?
good puns, even Green Book. But no, thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Oh, Garrett, you lift up my spirits higher than Ultron lifted Sokovia.
All right, Pat, you can't end this episode until you give us one Age of Ultron pun.
I gave you my zinger, the Dr.
End of
Giroux's greatest
episode.
creation.
I'd give you a
Oh.
hand, but Ultron cut it off.
Yeah, I think Anton had it right there with
Sokovia had it coming.
And Pat just got canceled.
Yeah, we know which side you were on in Civil War. That's
How
right.
dare you say that about this fictional country?
I'd love if there's a segment where it's like Crossfire in the Marvel universe, and there's just someone yelling, "But Sokovia had it coming." Like,
Ultron did nothing wrong.
The only Sokovian that we get to know in future movies is evil. Zemo.
he becomes a good guy though.
Doesn't
Kind
he
of.
die?
No, he's still around.
No, he's around.
He's around. He's in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
He's
You're right. I
he's-
should have known that.
He loves clubbing.
Oh, he's into club.
We need to end this episode.
I'm like not even
Never
kidding.
ending. Just like Ultron, this is never ending.
Well, that's all I have. Garrett, we're going to have you back soon for Dragon Ball Evolution.
Can't wait.
All right.
All right. That's it. Next week's episode is Out of Africa. Enjoy. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. As always, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. For those who would like to support us directly, we have a Patreon. Links to all of the above are in the description. Thanks for listening and see you next time.